Well, Christopher Coleman, CEO of Unconfined Life Institute, and I am Nancy Brooks Lane, are thrilled to be with you today to share information about a couple of parallel stories that have ended in some wonderful employment outcomes. The title, An Unconfined Life, and the role of employment will evolve and explain itself as we move forward in telling parallel stories that have come together to really create an opportunity for high quality outcomes. So the parallel stories have to do with the fact that I was in a director position with a provider organization that had begun to evolve and shift from a very traditional facility-based centristic organization to a person-centered approach. At this time, we were able to learn from some of the best based on some national initiatives that were going on. Doug Crandall, who is also the individual who has worked closely with Christopher along with myself, had written the first customized employment grant for Georgia, and we were awarded that. As a result, we were able to bring in some of the best of the best. Carrie Griffin and Dave Hammes were doing training statewide and technical assistance to the awardees of the grant. Michael Callahan was active in Georgia, working and doing training. And then the other landmark point in our systems change was the training and technical assistance to providers through Dr. Wayman, Dr. Inge, Grant Revel, and Dr. Butterworth. Those were really the pivotal points in our systems change that brought together the factors needed for Christopher to be able to work toward a dream that he has had. And I must mention the work of Dr. Chris Button, who was spearheading opportunities for providers to tap into these wonderful systems change opportunities. So the next piece that was happening tangential to this evolution of a system was the evolution of a relationship with Christopher. Christopher, Doug, and I met. He was a participant in the customized employment grant, and over time we were able to move from the relationship of a customer and an employment consultant role to colleagues. And that has been a beautiful opportunity for both of us, and many lessons learned that we'll share with you toward the end as we summarize today's time with you. The piece that Christopher talked about that was so critical in our being able to bond and build trust and move forward together was the empowerment and self-advocacy that was respected that he brought to the relationship. And I'm quoting, you said it was powerful that you felt not only were you being listened to, you were being heard and you were valued.
And that meant so much to me as I move forward in my career.
So, self-employment, which is one of the options through a customized employment process that begins with discovery, has some values and methodology shifts that have to be the core that an organization works from. And that includes the respect for self-determination and choice, person-centered and individualized supports, focusing on strengths, not deficits, inclusion as the basis of any of the goals that we're working toward, whether it be employment or the way an individual spends their day when they're not working, just like any of us want to have that valued role in their community, both as employment and how we spend our non-employment days. And then also an employment first policy, that should be the first and preferred choice for working age adults. And then we also speak of career planning and career paths, not just putting someone in the next available job.
Thank God.
So Christopher, looking at self-employment as a means to your career path, had some very specific aspects that were important to how you wanted to move forward through the process.
Yeah, I think the first thing I always had a vision from my work and my life, and so I needed someone that could support that vision and that goal. And so, as the CEO of Unconfined Life Institute, my vision was to help anyone see that they could live an unconfined life regardless of the situation or the disability, that they could truly be free to be who they are. And I believe that my life exemplified that. So I wanted to become a motivational speaker, a life coach, and writer who help people achieve an unconfined life.
And I love the way that there's poetry in the vision that you had. It's like taking what people might see as the barriers to be able to achieve this career goal. You paradoxically use them to show that you can bust myths, and that aspect of who you are is not a barrier. You used it as a strength.
Like one of the things I was told when I first went into the profession was, because of your voice, maybe you should not be a motivational speaker. And here what I realized, my audience paid closer attention to me because of my voice. They were in the other speaker, they were probably falling asleep because they don't have to really tune in and listen. So that's been one of my greatest assets, is what some people would consider to be a disability.
And that's such a brilliant way of shifting and busting myths that in the past had been seen, well, you're not employable. You've got these deficits, where we know absolutely you're employable. People's lives are better for being connected with you, and showing that what our very short-sighted culture sees as not workable, you have shown is workable. So I know that anytime an individual moves into the world of work, and especially self-employment, there are fears and concerns. What were some of those that you thought deeply about?
I think my major fear wasn't that, because I do the work, my major fear was, will others realize how much I had to offer? Will they allow my disability to blind them from my abilities? And that was my major fear with going into the motivational speaking career.
Which is so tragic, because they're already stereotyping you before they have gotten to know all the wonderful facets of who you are. And so the fear that you would be able to push through that initial, where many people just shut off, It's like, okay, I'm not hearing anything else he says because all I can see is this.
Right.
So that often closes doors unjustly before the person even has a chance to share more about who they are and what they can bring to the world of work.
Right, but you know a beautiful part, and that within 5 minutes, I can tell that my audience is drawn to me. And I know that no matter what they thought 5 minutes ago, I have completely changed the outlook on people with disability. And that, to me, is awesome.
And you see a little humor in it too.
Yeah, oh yeah. I have my little fun with them, but you know, why not? You know?
Absolutely. That again, that charisma that you bring, and as we'll talk a little bit about your life story, you at a very early age had to deal with those kinds of barriers. So you have a genius level of having skills to break through those barriers that people automatically set up. You've really developed a great strategy, and again, you're busting myths very, very effectively, very, very efficiently. And as you say, people, and I'm quoting you, so tell me if I got it right.
Oh, I will.
People who begin to categorize you and put you in a box expect less of you, so you give them much more.
Exactly. Exactly. That might be my life motto, actually, is to show people not only can I meet up to your expectation, but I can also surpass your expectation.
Absolutely, absolutely. So another piece that many people struggle with is, how do you know if self-employment is the best option versus wage employment?
That's a good question. I like to be totally honest with you because that's a big question that you must ask yourself. And what I like to say is you got to be ready for the possibility of you thinking that you want to be self-employed. You know, you must know that there are a lot of responsibility that you have to take on that you wouldn't have if you were a wage employee. So one of the most important things is to be able to take on responsibility and say, yes, I want this bad enough that I'm willing to take on the responsibility. For me, with my disability, sometimes I have seizures. I want a more flexible lifestyle. You know? Sometimes I might not want to get out the bed the next morning because I am self-employed. I can make that decision for myself.
And I think the beauty of how you look at that, first of all, you do have all those aspects of what drives someone to be a leader, a CEO. I can't imagine you having to deal with the structure of an organization that's not aligned with your vision and mission, the frustrations of how bureaucracy can interfere with getting good outcomes. The other piece, having that flexibility so that when aspects of how your disability can impact you, like your seizures, and you need that time to be able to recover and get your body back to a better place. And then the other piece, I know you wanted to be your own boss. That was a dream. That was part of the passion that you had. So self-employment works so well with who you are as an entrepreneur, the creativity and wanting to be in control of how you move forward to do what you feel is kind of your life calling.
Yeah, I feel like I'm a natural born leader. You know, some people they're not naturally able to lead. Well, me, I telling people what to do. Sometimes I tell you what to do. It's natural for me to tell people what to do.
Absolutely, and you've got the charisma that is needed to not only tell people what to do, but to motivate them to want to do it.
Yeah, and lead them toward better careers. You know, I like that my employees are reaching the top of their career through my leadership. And so I like that a lot. So.
Yeah, absolutely fits with who you are. So the other piece that was critical to you to be able to make this vision turn into the reality of your company was you had to have champions who surrounded you and saw the importance and the key piece of best practices that you need to drive that process.
Right.
That we were there as consultants, we were there to help break down barriers, and we were there to help you develop assets so that you could move forward to get the infrastructure in place and the resources that are required for your business.
What I like to tell people is some people don't realize that morale is a resource. And what I mean by that is if you look at an underdog, someone who ultimately wins, even though he was an underdog, it was because they had people pulling for them and chanting for them and really believing in them when they didn't believe in themselves. And that's what I needed to achieve, what I have achieved, it, having people around me that believe that the vision that you have can be a reality in your life.
So, the process of self-employment has very strategic steps that have to be considered to ensure that this is going to be a profitable idea. And so the first one is you've got to make sure that there is a need, that this is a feasible option, and that it's going to result in you having an earning wage or a wage that you can live on. So what were some of the processes, the thoughts, the discussions that were important to you realizing, yes, this is an idea, but if the idea doesn't result in a living wage, what does that mean? And how did you ensure that you felt confident to move forward to further prove to folks that yes, this is a good idea, it's a need, and it is going to be a means of being able to make a living?
Well, what I like to say is feasibility equals flexibility. And what I mean by that is as I go out and I speak, I work with my audience, I also listen to what they need and what they want from a motivational speaker or a life coach. And so I go back and I tweak my program to meet their needs. So So part of my try area was just learning what my customers really wanted and how can I provide their needs for them. And through that, the vision of the organization have changed and molded into that beautiful institution I can work with.
And testing out a product can be so simple. Something as easy as offering to pull together a means where which you can test out the product or service, and in your case it was motivational speaking, and some of that you did voluntarily, where you were then able to get feedback and critiques from trusted folks who sat in on the sessions that you had in the community. So that quickly gave you the information, the input, what's working, what's not working, to know how to move forward.
Yeah, and not only that, but that quickly gave me paid engagement, because even though my audience had me for free, they went out and they told other people about me, so it almost free advertisement at the same time. You know, so,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So one key piece in starting your own business is the business plan, and many folks find this can be very intimidating, overwhelming. So talk a little bit how you simplified that process so it made sense and it provided the integral pieces to show that your business could be profitable, but you were able to do it in a way that simplified this nebulous idea of you've got to have this sophisticated business plan.
Well, I want to say you are getting ready to write a business plan. The first thing you need to do is relax. It's not that bad, you know. If you have decided to go into business, then you already have the business plan inside of you. You just need to somehow put it on paper. You know, put down your vision, put down your goals and what you want to accomplish, where you see yourself 5 years from now and 10 years from now. And over time, you have a business plan. It's really not that bad.
And the beauty of it too is there are so many resources, templates on the websites of various organizations. You can Google, SCORE, and business centers that are frequently housed in universities. And there's tons of literature on self-employment for folks with disabilities. So Googling all of that, once you get into processes that we typically haven't used in the past as we've worked with folks, really become less intimidating when you take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and move forward and really put to paper just the logical, as you say, ideas you have within you, and then adding the financial piece of what the expenses and what the revenues need to be to balance out.
Right. Yeah.
One thing that has been so impressive is the strategies that you have come up with to bring attention to your business, marketing and advertising. Talk about how you go about thinking through that creative process, how you want to structure that creative process to bring it into an advertising context.
Oh, well, first I want to go back to the first time I started my company. It's quite different from today. When I started my company 15 years ago, I did a lot of mass mailing with brochures and phone call and email. Well, now, today with Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, you can be a lot more creative in your marketing and advertisement, and you can get your information directly to the person that you want to get it to. Whereas before with mass mailing, you had no idea if it would even get to the right hand. But one of my philosophies in marketing and advertisement is I want to be the icon of what I want my customers to get from me. So one of the things is live an unconfined life. So I sent out a email with a picture of me skydiving, a perfect example of an unconfined life. I mean, here you see one picture of me in a wheelchair and another picture of me flying through the air. And you get the concept of anybody living an unconfined life. That guy is. That guy can teach me what I need to know to live an unconfined life.
Absolutely. And you're also continually, this is what I love about you, because we get to spend time together frequently, and it's like moments of creativity will come out of the conversation where a note might be said or a comment might be said, and from that it's like, wow, that could be part of the marketing.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I believe that everyone's answers is within them. And so all they have to do is talk it out and they will get the right idea, the right advertisement for their specific company.
And it's also, the 21st century workforce has so many aspects that fit perfectly with customizing your job and being able to be creative. And so many companies are also wanting to be more than just businesses that make money. They're wanting to give back. There's kind of a golden movement to make sure that businesses are more than just making money, but they actually are contributing beyond the business to help make communities better and stronger. And I love that about your work as well, because you seek out those opportunities.
My work is 100% focused on the individual and helping them to achieve whatever they want to achieve in their life.
Absolutely. The other piece that was so unique and original was how you formed your board, and you wanted to make sure that your board members were active, they were participating, they weren't just figureheads, and you had very clear expectations regarding who you were going to invite to be board members, and additionally the commitment that you expected of the board members as you are moving forward to make your business viable. Talk about that structure, because I was really fascinated with how you conceived of the board being more than just figureheads.
Yeah. one thing I realized as an employee, as the owner of the company, that I don't have all the answers. I'm the boss, yeah, but I'm not the accountant. I'm not the marketing guy. I'm not the PR guy. So when I built my board, I looked for people that would fit into the place that I'm liking in. And so my board is people that are actively involved in marketing my business and doing the PR and the promotion and doing the accounting books because I don't want nothing to do with that. No, I'm not an accountant, don't want to be an accountant, so it was important for me to have a accountant on my board.
And you know, many times in the past, self-employment was considered to be a contained set of skills where the person had to do everything. They had to be responsible and have the skill sets to do all those aspects. And we know that typical businesses outsource aspects of what it takes to be self-employed. So that's a myth that the person who starts their own business has to be able to do all of these aspects. So I think that is a wonderful way you've not only incorporated the idea of outsourcing aspects of that, but you actually brought those skill sets into your board, the board members.
Right now, I would say that it's also important for me to know some of it. Even though I'm not an accountant, I've watched my accountant and I know how it's done. For in case he's not able to show up one day and something needs to be done, I have a general knowledge of that. So I don't want you as a boss to think that means I don't have to know all of this stuff. It's always a good idea to have some type of understanding of the different pieces of your business.
But you don't have to be the expert.
No,
You just have to be able to identify anything that that needs attention to it, and then pull in the correct folks.
Right, exactly.
So when you began thinking about starting your own business, there were resources that were needed to help get that set up, that started. And one of the beautiful pieces of the customized employment grant was flexible funding, that it wasn't so rigidly put that you feel like you waste money having to tie dollars to an aspect of the funding stream and how it's set up, which is really not an effective use of resources. So the customized employment really brought in a logical aspect of the dollars could be used flexibly within this reasonable structure that was ethical, good steward use of dollars that we often don't have in some of the more rigid funding structures.
And one of the things that I found fascinating with that is that is the perfect testing ground for someone that wants to be self-employed. You are allowing them to learn how to budget their money and pick and choose what is most important in their career and setting that foundation of giving them an opportunity to see what it's like to be a self-employed person.
And it involves very strategic thinking and use of dollars. So it's not a free-for-all by any means. It's still very much grounded in good use of the dollars, but you're not categorized in a way where money is wasted simply because it has to be spent in this manner, even though that doesn't tie into the ultimate outcomes. So that was a wonderful piece, that flexible funding and individual budgets. Work incentives are also key, and I just wanted to point out a few things here so that the folks who are participating in the webinar have this information. There are a variety of work incentives that are very critical to be aware of. One, plan for achieving self-support, the PASS plan. Property essential to self-support, PES. And also, I would stress for anybody, no matter what structure of work that they are interested in, whether it be self-employment or wage employment, customized employment, to get a copy of the Benefits Planning Query Book. It is a wealth of information that will be so beneficial as you look at the intersection of money earned through work and the benefits that you may receive, and the experts to connect on work incentives that might be appropriate for your particular work goals, benefits counseling, where they have been certified to work in the area of incentives. Incentive coordinators, or sometimes they're called benefits navigators. So I can't stress enough to reach out to those individuals to tap into the resources that are available, again, so that people can continue to move forward to have a working life. You also benefited from vocational rehabilitation services, and that's one of the traditional funders. And then one of your key areas of funding and support came from corporations and private funders, and actually churches. You know, churches can be a wealth of resources for individuals in the community. So talk a little bit about that part.
That was quite a fun part, because you really realize who are behind you in your goals, and you will be surprised at the number of people and companies and corporations that will be willing to support what your vision is. So I have worked with people from my best friends who can only give $10 a month to corporations that really believe in the business, and sometimes support me $2,000 and $3,000 a year. And so that wide range of revenue been really crucial in my career and moving forward with what I want to accomplish.
And you've also had some just serendipitous connections that have resulted in funding and furthering, it's got a marketing aspect to it, and furthering the work you do to help people reframe maybe some of the challenges and the points where they're stuck in their life. One was Sephora. I think that was a beautiful story where you just happened to meet one of the vice presidents.
I tell that I do have a Valentine's Day. I was at a restaurant in my community where I go regularly, and we will talk more about that later. But I was sitting at a restaurant and that happened dinner by myself. I took myself out for Valentine's Day. And he was sitting there with his partner. And he saw that I was just enjoying my day. And he walked over and he said, I'm sorry, but I just got to meet you. You know, your personality, who you are. My son has cerebral palsy, and I've just been intrigued by you. But come to find out, he was one of the CEO of Safari. And so, within 2 months, I was booked to come out and speak at his headquarters for all of his employees.
And the other interesting aspect where you talk about you're the logo for your business, your life is the logo for your business, is that through the work you've done with individuals who have had some resources where you've benefited their family members, they see that through your life you are a living example of what is possible to have a good life, and you've benefited families and other individuals that were close to the person, and they have said that they want to give back to your organization because you fill a niche, you're effective, and they want to see you being able to help other people.
Yeah, and one other thing, of course, over 15 years, my organization have changed. You know, we are not the same company we initially thought out to be. And with that, you have your donors. And some will drop off because your vision and your ministry have changed. But some will always say, wow, you affected my life, and no matter what you evolve into, I always want to support what you bring to the table in my family life. So one of my major donors have been with me for over 10 years now. Now, he did give it on a major level, even though we have evolved over the years.
The other part of that I think is key is that you are continually looking at building those relationships, living the example of everybody having the potential and opportunity to have a good life, and that is grounded in that passion that you have. And I know you have talked before about you can make money off of your passions.
Oh yeah, that's the best way to make money off of your passion. I mean, if you want to excel in life, do what you love to do. Don't worry about the money, just do it. And you will look back 5 and 10 years from now and say, wow, I got paid to do all that. And that's the beauty of everything. And I don't wake up saying, oh, I got to go to work today. I wake up excited about what I get to do. And getting involved in people's lives and helping them to achieve whatever they want to achieve.
And that goes back to that best practice piece of where we spend time getting to know the person and learning what those passions and gifts are, and where in the community can that need be met, either through an employer, wage job, or starting your own business.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. That segues so beautifully into the notion of social capital, which is huge in the work we do. What is the role of social capital with your particular business?
That huge for me. I sometimes say that social capital is the most important thing that I have in my business because like my community that I live in, I go to the same restaurant about 2 or 3 times a week, and they know me. They know what I do. They know what I'm passionate about, and they have gotten to know me in such a way that before I get to the table, my drink at the table, they know what I want to drink. But in return, just like the upcoming weekend, I said I needed to raise money for my nonprofit. But there's a bar and grill that I go to every week, and they say, "Oh, you need to raise money. We'll do a fundraiser for you." Without me even asking, they have always said, "Yeah, we will do a fundraiser." So that is the important part of having social capital and having those connections in your community. I really believe in your business and want to continue to support you as you strive to achieve things within your business.
And you can do so much more in a team effort than any individual can do alone.
Right.
And so that really is such a blatant comparison with the old traditional processes where we kept people segregated and not included in the community, and miss a huge piece of how people can have quality lives and a working life, because it takes us all together to have a good life.
I tell people all the time, when I'm in Atlanta, I'm rolling around, there's so many people that are interested in my life. And so they call me over and they get to know me. And before I know it, we now have a working relationship. And my goal wasn't to find a new client that day. I was just going out living my life. And I think that part of it is you just have to relax and be who you are, and the business will be drawn to you. And you just do what you do.
Perfectly said. And you've got to have a repeated presence in those environments to even have the opportunity to connect.
Right, and that's why I said, I go to the same restaurant over and over because I'm building a relationship with them. Not because I like the food. I'm building a relationship with the people in the restaurant who know who I am.
So you have gone through rebranding, and the key to that, in terms of being able to remain relevant to a business, is you've got to tune into what are the needs, what are the ever-changing needs culturally. So you broadened your vision and increased your customer base, and you really, as you said earlier, focused on being able to reach out to more folks, having a broader customer base through the use of publishing and social media. So you have written a couple of books. Talk about that.
Well, before I talk specifically about the book, I'm going to tell you, I have a sustainability business. You're going to have to rebrand somewhere along the way. Things change, people change, time change, and you have to change with that. It's just the way it is. But I don't call it rebranding as much as I call it reinventing yourself. You know, every 5 or 6 years, you gotta look at your website and your brochure and all about it and ask yourself, is it relevant to where we're at today? And one of the ways I view that is my books. My first one was solitary refinement, but I found that people want to know how did I do, how do they live the life that I live? How do they achieve an unconfined life? And so I wrote my first book based on trying to show others how they too can live an unconfined life. But more recently, I feel like my audience and my customers want to look more deeper into who I am. They want to get to know the man. So I've written my second book, No Longer Confined, and basically an autobiography where I talk about the details of my life and the details of pursuing an unconfined life.
And it's a beautiful story, starting from very early on when you entered school, just being wheeled to the corner, left alone, and people assuming there was nothing within you that warranted being a part of the group. And then the point in time where you began to teach yourself, and because the system was so inadequate and so had really pushed you to the fringe, one day you came out speaking and reading at a point where you shocked everybody. And you've taken that to continue through your business model. And I think the fact that you're forever looking at culturally where we are with businesses, what are niches that you can meet that tie into the gifts and talents and brilliance that you have, is part of that early value and drive that you developed, where you knew you had to advocate for yourself and you had to be in charge of how you were going to move forward through life, because many people weren't going to get who you are. So again, I applaud the brilliance with which you continually are looking at where your business is, where it needs to be, what's changing, and how you need to change with that. So bringing it all together, you've been in business 16 years. And again, I just have to show when good opportunities are provided, like through the Customized Employment Grant and the TTAP project, what's possible? How can we as an organization that helps support folks with disabilities move forward, reinvent ourselves, learn from the research and what shows is the best way to have quality lives? The other piece that I want to take a minute for you to talk about is any advice you would give to folks who are considering starting their own business.
Yeah. My biggest piece of advice is don't be afraid of trying. It's not as important. Well, let me try that. My biggest piece of advice is don't be afraid of trying. You must know what you did wrong, just as you must know what you did right. Both things will educate you and teach you how to build your business. I think so many people don't go into business because they are afraid of failing. But that part of the process is a very crucial part of the process is learning what you do well and what you don't do well.
And failure, as we've talked about, brings knowledge.
Yeah.
And it moves you forward to finding the place where success can begin to happen. So don't be afraid of failure. Get out there, take action. You're not going to have all the answers. You're not going to know exactly what the next step will be, but you've got to take action to be able to move closer and closer to what's going to work and what's not going to work.
It helps to refine your business and teach you the right path that you should take.
So, in our 16 years of you and Doug Crandall and I working together, what lessons do you think we learned from one another?
I think I learned that I don't want that. No, I have to make that joke. I hope it's okay. But I learned the value of being valued. I learned the value of being valued because I work with a lot of people. I built my career that did not value me. Real business owner, as someone that can achieve things in life. I think when I work with you and Dan and all the other people, I felt like I was valued as a self-employment, and that was so important to me.
And you know, Plato says the most important work begins at the beginning. And if our beginning connections did not go well, we wouldn't have moved past that point. And I know we made some mistakes early on with the job coach matching.
Yeah.
And you were very specific about why that wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
And in the arrogance of maybe how systems would have worked in the past, it would have been take it or leave it, you know, this is what we have to offer.
Yeah.
But we listened, we valued you, and we said, yeah, that makes complete sense. And then Doug and I began to be your job coaches, our employment consultant, which is really what we've evolved into because we're working together as a team. We consult with you, who drives the process, to see where we need to move forward. And then from the expertise we may bring to the process, we can kind of give you points of red flags that may be issues, do's and don'ts of what we've learned, and then you know what you want. You bring that passion and that vision, and it takes that approach together, that team approach, that consulting together, that respect for all to make that a success. And I would say this sums it all up for me, what I learned from you, and I'm just going to kind of leave it with the folks who are participating in the audience for further reflection. One day Christopher said, can the professionals become teachable? And I love that. How many times has that been the reverse? Can we teach this individual with disabilities. And so I love the way you word, can the professionals become teachable? Okay, so ending, here are some contacts for Christopher's website and Facebook page. Please visit those. They're full of information more about Christopher's story from birth, where he was not expected to live, was expected to be placed in an institution, all the way to the point where he took a huge risk on his own to move from Louisiana to Georgia, had no contacts here, and finished college and moved forward to have the kind of life he wanted. So please do visit those web pages to learn more, and there are also ways you can contact Christopher directly. Any parting words?
No, relax, enjoy, and do what you have a passion to do.
Amen.